A very good morning. We're glad you're still with us. If you went with us into the break, for those that are joining us, welcome on board. It's now all hands on deck as we begin the Kickstarter discussion, where we shall be looking at the work of the 11th Parliament in 2023 and also some reflections on what ought to have been but didn't happen when it comes to legislation. I'm joined by the MP for Bubulo East, Honourable John Musila, and researcher, political analyst, and leading commentator Yusuf Serunkuma for that discussion. But before I go into the depth of, well, what they have for us this morning, just let me give you a preamble of what's happening. We come on the backdrop of challenges, especially when it comes to legislation. Many times Parliament has been on the back end and the spotlight has been negative as legislation is either not forthcoming or when it does, it's controversial. Many have said that MPs are failing the country, but of course we all know that their work is enormous and that what they do is of course responsible for pretty much of the development that we see. That is perspective from where you see it. We shall be able to share with you exactly what is on the ground. It also, this particular discussion comes on the backdrop that we've just learned that Uganda will be hosting the next summit of Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth. It's described as the CSPOC that is slated for the 3rd to the 6th of January 2024. That is more 12 months from now. But it's a significant event, and of course Uganda has to prepare. We know that hosting some of these conferences across the globe does a lot in emboldening a country's stature, and that Uganda has been chosen is something we shall be asking the Honourable Minister to take us through. So allow me introduce yet again Honourable John Musila and political analyst Yusuf Serunkuma. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
I'm inclined to say Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
It's my very first time to see you.
Yeah, sure.
Though
this year, right.
I find the word a little bit overused. How are we doing?
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, sure.
How are we doing?
It should have been happy all year.
Mm-hmm.
Which you knew, which I knew, and we have gone through.
We've gone through.
We are part of the cosmos, and when we go around the sun for 365 and a quarter days, and we say thank you that we have not had an accident, that the planet Earth has not wavered from its orbit.
Yeah.
So we must be happy.
Allow me just pick it from there, something that may not be in our mainstream discussion. When you speak of the cosmos, I was reading somewhere and somebody opined that we are part of a cosmic joke as human beings, and that sometimes we take ourselves too seriously when the gods are simply having a good time.
That one is right. His Majesty Emperor Selassie Jah Rastafari. You are a simple thing. Maybe not, which is the smallest element of anything. Is it an atom or anything like that? You are too small for the cosmos. Yeah. Too small. It's like, I don't know what to really describe it, but you as a human being, why do you take yourself to be so important than other creations? Are you aware that there are other creatures which are bigger than you, much more wiser than you? But it's only that you fool yourself and think that you are so intelligent. No, there are some creatures here on planet Earth which are more intelligent.
That's right.
Which can even foretell the future for even 100 years. You can't. Okay. You can't.
Yusuf Serunkuma.
I think that's a plagiarized joke by William Shakespeare.
My apologies. I didn't put it off as my own.
Shakespeare said,
yes,
as flies to wanton boys, so are we to the gods.
That's right.
They kill us for sport. Right, so we are like the way fly, the way young boys play with little flies.
That's right.
So that's like the gods. They also play with us. And I think listening to Honourable Musila talk about it, how insignificant we are in this entire cosmos, you know, I'm always reflecting about the people who carry themselves as immortals. In our midst, they take these big decisions, you know, as if they're not going to die the next day. as if they are larger than life, you know, and we live amongst them, they live amongst us. John here knows some of them who claim to be our leaders, but they behave like they are gods or beasts or something, you know. And yet, as flies to mountain boys, so are we to the gods. An MP collapsed in Kanungu recently, and those who have been watching him quite a lot, he's very, very pompous, very, very well spoken. You know, he speaks the language of I'm in charge of my entire being. And if you've been watching, if you've been watching the comments on social media, I think there's been a big reminder to be humble.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's us flies to wanton boys, so are we to the gods.
At Morning at NTV, we are humbled to be able to have you here to share some of those perspectives about life.
Thank you.
Honorable.
Yes, please.
I spoke about the fact that we've had news that Uganda has been selected to host the next summit of the Conference of Speakers and the presiding officers of the Commonwealth.
Yes.
Now, somebody might say, this is 1 year away from now.
Yes.
How significant is it that we should be paying attention?
Very significant to this country. The matter that you are selected amongst all other countries, there are parameters they use. It's just not only picking on you. First of all, the stability of that country and the security and everything like that. Then also the social part of it. Do you have enough hotels and whatever? That's the kind of thing. The hospitality part of it is very, very important. But the practices of democracy all suffice very, very highly. Why? Because, you know, I would call it this group is for purposes of one, imperial. Imperial for us Rastas, that is pure imperial, trying to remind you that at one time you were and the British, yes, physically, but now psychologically you must remain with them. And so they have their own tenets, they have their own way of doing things. So those are the parameters they consider. But for Uganda as Uganda, we look at it as something quite very, very important. Why? The economy of the country. We are trying to get friends that we can interact with for purposes of economic benefit, trade, whatnot like that. The other issue is even the event itself in the country like Uganda. How much does it bring in? Yeah, while it is true we push in quite a lot, but still it brings in. Countries all over the globe struggle to host such conferences, one to gain the name, be above others. The fact that you have been and still maybe you watching football in Qatar, isn't it so? Why should you watch football? Simply, a country is packaging and selling itself to the world and showing them that this is what we are.
Okay.
So the Uganda, which was simply a country which was almost a failed state at one time, raising to these heights, to me I feel as Ugandans, let alone other issues of politics and whatever, to me I feel it is a good trend and it's a good thing for us to host. Yeah.
Yusuf Serankuma, I believe you do agree when it comes to the significance of international conferences in strengthening a country's stature on the international stage. But we've had many of them in the country, including the iconic CHOGM. To this day, it is still a case study for gross mismanagement of an international event. Would you say a conference like the Conference of Speakers and Presiding Officers of the Commonwealth is something that we should look out for with so much gusto and hope to solve many of the problems that the Parliament is grappling with?
You said Commonwealth?
There is.
You know, I am a decolonial scholar, right? My scholarship, but in a very contemporary sense, not just at the level of discourse. I'm very interested in how do we decolonize and become fully liberated, so that our economies can grow again, right? I consider this, that, you know, we have 24 banks, commercial banks in this country.
24
commercial banks in this country, and 22 of them are foreign owned. and most of them come from Europe and North America and South Africa. The owners of those banks are based in those countries where we claim to have to share a Commonwealth. So those countries, when in Europe, they give loans at 1.5 interest rate. When they come here, they give loans at 27-35%. Right? And then you realize you have people doing business here in a free market economy, and they are competing with people who are getting loans at 1.5% and doing similar business in this space. That is very troubling for me when you claim to share Commonwealth, right? Banks which are based in Europe and North America, banks which are based in our former colonizer, who give us this thing called the Commonwealth. It doesn't make sense to me if these meetings don't translate into actual benefit to the ordinary person. For example, I would say if they are meeting, you know, with poor people compete to be seen, that's what what Commonwealth is, this peer public relations competition. But the significance of it, as members of the Commonwealth, we should maybe struggle to harmonize banking regimes. If a banking regime operates in the UK, it should be the same regime in this country.
That's right.
Right, but if you can't get that from this so-called meeting, it's sheer public relations amongst poor people. Right? You know Chogom 2007, and if you ask questions how much you benefit from this Chogom 2007, it's over 14 years right now. 15 actually, 15 years after Chogom 19. If you look back and review our democracy, our human rights record, our economy, the ways, the levels of poverty in this country, you wonder 15 years down the road, which is not a very long time, how have we benefited from these international meetings, right? And consider this, that other countries, for example in East Asia, don't even consider the thing Commonwealth as anything significant, yet they were also colonized by the British, right? And if you consider the levels of growth and development and standards of living in those countries, and look at us who claim to live under this umbrella of our former colonizer, it's a waste of time. We recently had another international meeting where our African leaders were bussed like small children and taken to Washington to speak to you know, Senator Secretary Blinken in the U.S.
My cobbler would say,
but look, it's serious. It's serious, you know, because you know we are the richest continent on the planet, by far the richest, right? And then constantly these poor continents, United States, you know, North America and Europe, are always bossing us around. These are the last enclaves of colonial control, right? So you had the Africa-Washington Summit in the U.S. 2022, we just concluded. And what happened there? You know, the American government was negotiating individual deals with individual African countries in copper, in gold, in oil. Have you ever thought about producing a Ugandan entrepreneur? Consider this, if Total, which has the largest share in our oil export,
project,
if Total was owned by this man, and we know all the profits going to make, all the profits going to make will be building roads and estates and all these things in Mbali, in Vuvulo. Consider this difference. But problem with the African leaders, you know, we all pride in belonging to our former colonizer. I'm telling you, those who fought colonialism.
We have one of the eminent leaders with us here, a member of parliament who is in the deep and the thick of it when it comes to legislation. Has Parliament, for example, addressed itself to concerns of indigenous ownership of banks and why we find ourselves in a position where most, not even most, but all the banks are foreign owned, and any attempt by a Ugandan to establish one is always met with sheer devastating
sheer brutality.
force.
My son, Serunkuma, should separate the Western type of banking and the Africanized Rastafarian banking. Bag in your home, you are aware you do banking. The traditional, you may call it crude and whatever, but it is banking.
It is banking.
Some form of banking. And that's how these guilds came up to build themselves up in Europe, because this one today is a cash nexus economy, which demands that banking must thrive. He knows it very well. But he should also question himself, let alone the African form of banking. where you may not even count that you have a granary, you have some kind of potatoes, muogo, I mean, where you come from.
Yeah.
It's a form of banking, not cash nexus. It's peasant nexus, peasant connected banking. Leave alone that. The West is cracking and falling if it doesn't know. And the African Revolution, especially by the vanguards like Kwame Nkrumah, Kenyatta, Obote, and others, we can now feel them today. He doesn't know that many banks from the West have collapsed. Where is now, today? They may have transformed to something else, but where is Barclays? Just of recent. He is an author, he knows this. Let him make research about it. Where is Grindlays? Grindlays is something like that. I grew up knowing Grindlays, whatnot. Are they still there? But can we have an example of an indigenous bank, not particularly Uganda, but around Africa? Around Africa. Bank of Africa, I think is Nigerian or something like that. We have the Kenyan banks here, Equity Bank and
How
others.
can you advocate for a Bank of Africa when you cannot push for a bank in Uganda owned by a Ugandan? How do you intend to make that feasible?
You are being too trivial. And yes. And localizing ourselves, our development to only the small speck of Uganda. We are now looking at Africa. And they said it.
You're hoping to thrive on the African space. You can't thrive in the Ugandan space.
John, let me give you information. In 2019, the Auditor General of this country found that between 1993 and 2016, 7 locally owned banks were closed by the government of Uganda without minutes. The then Governor Bank of Uganda won't look at a bank and have it closed the next day without minutes. There's a case which I think Steve Pereira recently won, which indicated that there was nothing like, there were no banking flaws to have his bank closed. Right? So the closure of 7 locally owned banks under this banking regime, and I'm talking about the Commonwealth, the idea that, you know, we share a Commonwealth. Banking being the thing around which economies are built.
That's right.
Your government, working with the comprador in chief, Tumsime Mtebide, closed 7 locally owned banks. All of them. They didn't have a single meeting where they sat down and said, we agree they've broken rule A, B, C, D, so we should close them. That's what happened. A good, it's a good long information to me. So no, it's Auditor General's report. You remember, Pam?
No, I'm saying.
You know this.
I know.
Discussed on the floor,
I thought you were giving me information which I should.
I thought you should know, but then you're saying, you know, we have been unable to do that.
Gentlemen, allow me to keep this in context, because somebody who will be joining us right now will be wondering what the Parliament and then the banking sector within the prism or the space of legislation. Shouldn't we be hearing discussions, debate being pushed by members of Parliament,
very much so,
on reversing the spectre that allows foreigners to literally own every aspect of our economy? Shouldn't that be the legislation you should be pushing?
The dynamics of closing of banks, to me, I'm talking as a Ugandan, is very political.
Very political.
Very political.
Okay.
Should you be too heavy monetarily? How do I control you? That is the mind of the leaders of this country. And he knows it. I'm not running away. It's just because I'm an NRM person and then, no, that's not the case. we also have our own,
all right.
We have niches where we belong to as a person. It knows at you, by the way. But you know, things are going wrong here and there. We have made mistakes along the way. NRM. Maybe you were either too young or not yet born in 1988 when President Museveni said,
I was born.
We don't, you were born. That we don't need the coffee, we don't need the what? Uproot. And a few people, they did so. But many people said, no, we are not going to do that. Then he brought the barter system.
Just
You
a moment,
remember?
just a moment,
The
yeah.
barter system. We are trying to say, review. History teaches, it teaches us better. We made mistakes along the way. We are correcting them. The closure of banks, the 7 banks, and, you know, founded by our Ugandan entrepreneurs. You know, it affects all of us. True. Maybe they would have grown to a level to get the whole of Africa, like Bank of Africa, like now Equity Bank of Kenya. In Uganda, I don't know how many branches, but they should be not less than 10. And yet, it's just a bank by the Kikuyus of Kenya.
So what should be done?
What should be done?
As legislators, because this context must be clear to all of us.
I want to give more context to what Jonas said, because I want you to expose this thing called the Commonwealth and how useless and colonial it is. The closure of 7 banks, by the way, don't blame it so much on Mr. Museveni and to Museveni Mtebile. Our problem with this too is that they've accepted to be used. This is a colonial project. How these Mzungu, poor in their continents, were struggling to find ways of return to this continent, continue to exploit it as they did in the colonial time. So in 1980, coming to 1990, after the end of the Cold War, they pushed across the African continent a thing called structural adjustment. It affected coffee. This man is from Bugisu. He knows. To this day,
I'm a coffee man.
They're still fighting colonizers to take over coffee. So under this thing called the Commonwealth, they pushed economies across the African continent. They even went to Asia. The Asians refused, so that they can do a thing called privatization. And privatization ruined our economies. But in the process, they started harassing individual leaders so that they can give them back the economy. If you want to give them back the economy, you do things like this. You give them banking, you give them telecommunication, you give them coffee. This man, to this day, is still fighting Museveni over allowing to be used to give over coffee to a colonizer. So you give them electricity. You know how we are the biggest, the tariff for electricity.
You say the man is fighting Museveni, he might not agree.
I can't agree with that.
No, you didn't.
It's a good joke for this.
The Pineti deal. The Pineti deal. This man was at the forefront of the struggle against the Pineti deal.
All right.
And Museveni came. If you're fighting Pineti, you're fighting me, which means Grace Musila. In you fighting the Pineti deal, you were directly fighting Mr. Museveni. But the point I have to make is that
let me make a rejoin down that.
As they meet
quickly, so
as they meet to legislate under this thing called the Commonwealth, they need to be aware that it's one of those still standing enclaves of colonial control. If you can't discuss, developing local entrepreneurs, if you can't discuss freeing this economy from foreign control, people coming under the blessing of the part of it was the Commonwealth, then this meeting is exactly useless.
Please, your rejoinder.
The cooperative movement started here in Uganda. That was 1913. But came to stage more by 1948 with the I.K. Musazis and others. The revolution took the whole country like a storm. That was indigenizing the economy, somewhere, somehow, but based on the Rochdale model of Britain. Somewhere, somehow, the governments which came in, especially the government of Obote, the first one, did really stamp heavily. But the second government of Obote put more energies in developing the cooperative movement, having known that it can be something which catalyst for the economy, the transformation of the economy. My younger brother should know that World Bank under its policies, especially with the Lome 1, Lome 2, which brought the structural adjustment policies in this country, and some of us got sold to it wholesale. We have now come to realize, for example, the layoffs of the time and everything like Kenya went it.
The one that was categorically called retrenchment.
Retrenchment, exactly. You have said it well. Retrenchment. Kenya was careful. For example, when it came to privatization and liberalization, questions were there, and Moi was fought left, right at the time, but he resisted. Don't we still have the Cooperative Bank of Kenya? It is intact.
Very intact.
What about the Commercial Bank of Kenya? 17 branches in Uganda.
Okay.
Where did our commercial banker go?
A time out for the rejoinder.
Thank you.
Allow me return to Yusuf Serunkuma and, of course, draw this discussion to exactly where the crust of the Kickstarter is today. Parliament. In light of 2023, many of us cannot but look at 2023 with hope. It doesn't really make sense to be overly pessimistic. And but you cannot look at the future without understanding what the past is. Do you think the previous parliament did a good job? And can that be, or rather, did Parliament do a good job last year, rather? Let's not say previous, but within context, of course, you will all refer back to the previous sessions and terms. Did it do a good job in 2022? And is there something that we can look out for in 2023?
So parliaments are judged by the landmark decisions. Parliaments pass so many legislations on a daily.
Yeah, sure.
Extremely many. But there are some groundbreaking legislations that we expect from Parliament. And it is these that determine the legacy of a Parliament, that give us hope for the future. There were quite a couple of contentious things which are very significant. One of them, which has to be thoroughly debated, I think is going to come back this year, is the Pineti deal. It is significant in the sense that if one single individual takes control of our biggest forex earner, which is coffee, there's danger for every single farmer in this country. So far they had made little progress on it, but you know, as the year closed, Mr. Museveni came back and he said he'll go ahead with the Pineti deal. Right, so we're looking at Parliament in that direction because that is very significant in the sense that it affects every single farmer in this country, and coffee being our biggest forex earner, it's a big one, right? But at a very personal level, when I look at Parliament, I'm often following up on the opposition. I don't follow the entirety of Parliament. You know, I'm very interested in the opposition because I know the entirety of Parliament. A great deal of it is theatre, really, and hope for, you know, for those who check the dictates of power, those who check the excesses of power. I've been disappointed ever since. For the last 2 years, I mean, since 2021, 2022, I've been very disappointed with the performance of our opposition, right? And when I say our opposition, I normally focus on the leader of the opposition, which is the Honorable Matthias Mpuga. I follow on very outstanding members of the opposition, such as Joel Sonyanyi, and what they've been performing. I'm very disturbed by their insistence on the spectacle. You know, the idea that we do something that looks like opposition. That's really bothering for me, you know, because...
Are you suggesting they are actors?
I've called it the spectacle of the opposition because, you know, as soon as Mr. Matthias Mpuga went into Parliament, he suggested, as leader of opposition, he suggested something he called the legislative agenda. Basically, in a few words, it's just something like, you know, Mr. Museveni is the president of this country, so we're going to suggest to him, we're going to give him a new document on how he's going to run this country. Right?
An alternative
policy position.
Policy position, yeah.
And you
Which
know,
is ideally what any opposition,
and I sat
but
back
it
and I
does.
kept wondering, this is a man we've been constantly reminded is an autocrat. Right? Whoever imagined their right minds that Mr. Museveni will drop whatever he planned.
Say it again, an autocrat.
I mean, this is the talk of the opposition, not me.
Okay.
Yeah, they
I thought it came from...
Well, I also think he's an autocrat. I should say that to you too.
Okay.
So he went around they went around the country in their independent constituencies, but also when they had a presidential candidate arguing, we are removing an autocrat. Right? And then once they were in Parliament, they started giving suggestions to the autocrat to implement. It's very mind-boggling to me because, you know, I thought the entire idea was to actually oppose, like spend your entire 5 years trying to get the autocrat out of power. Right? But as soon as they were already in these very lucrative and very beautiful positions, they had a legislative agenda. So that was very disappointing for me.
Allow me ask a question that might be simplistic, but are you suggesting, for example, that when the National Unity Platform laid the slogan, or took on the slogan, we are removing a dictator, they should not have agreed to become part of Parliament because they had failed to remove a dictator?
No, the idea in becoming part of Parliament was that Parliament is going to become the space of struggle, not the space of comfort and alternative agendas.
It is a space of struggle for
space
them.
of
Why are you
struggle.
suggesting it's a space of comfort?
But in the nature of the struggle that they promised, right? I can tell you, they even dropped all the symbolism of the struggle. You remember when they were always donned in red berets and red caps and red attires? They've all dropped this symbolism. Their speech is tame. They are, you know, they are meek. They are siding with the speaker. You know, the autocratism is in parliament is their friend. All these things are baffling to me, you know, and I want to move on to another very significant member of the opposition, who is the wonderful young legislator from Nakawa, Joel Senyonyi.
Yes.
You know, there was a very wonderful moment, a very spectacular performance when he grilled the CEO of Uganda Airlines. It was very spectacular. It made so much news. Right? It was very beautiful to watch Joel Senyonyi grill the Vamturachi, who is now serving as the CEO. The problem for me is that Joe and everybody else knew that this grilling is just for the spectacle of it. As long as the autocrat wants that woman to be CEO of Uganda Airlines, even if she went to 0 schools, she will be.
Honorable John Mosi.
But here's the problem. Why? My trouble is the more we're dragged in this spectacle, it looks beautiful, but for essentially nothing.
Honorable John Musila, listening to Yusuf Serunkuma, I get the picture. I don't know whether you do or anybody else out there does, that Parliament is one big theatre, and that members of Parliament, especially those of the opposition who are supposed to be doing a certain other job, they are simply part of what is a circus, according to Serunkuma. Do you agree with the...
No, I don't. Then the whole of Uganda is in a circus.
Also, give us your own rating of the last year.
To me, I think Yusuf should learn and know that there are procedures. He's a Muslim. You can't move with shoes into the mosque. He knows it very well. You can't. There are procedures of Parliament. Whether you are making a motion or whatever, there are procedures. That's why very heavily, many times we refer to those procedures, and many times, whether opposition or what, you are still a member of Parliament. Mr. Lope, I don't want to mention names.
Matthias Mpuga.
We know, when you say Lope, we know the guy who was the opposition now.
Is a decent, eloquent legislator. You know, one who, the Waswahili wanasema mtu wa kuiga, one young people like you should learn from. He has been in Parliament. This is my first time in Parliament. But to me, when you rate him, you really see one who knows very good procedures, how to approach an issue. Parliament is not about physical fighting. It is present your ideas. And ideas can either be bought or not. When we came to Pinette, what is he talking about? All of us. Did you see whether opposition or government, everybody agreed and we said, no, this is not a good document. All of us. Several things from the brothers from the opposition. We really go with them and we move with them, apart from a few. I wish to say, it's not right that you should say that they are a rubber stamp of the autocracy in this country. As an author, you know, in every government, there must be an oligarchy, a group of people who must direct the country. And whether in America or whatever, the secret group is always there. He knows it very well. An oligarch of this country.
You mean the mafia?
You mean the mafia?
No. Maybe Dracula's, I don't know.
The deep state?
Deep state would be suffice.
Okay.
A deep state maybe would suffice. There must be an origin of an idea from somewhere, from some
gentlemen like Matthias Mpuga and the likes of the MP for Butambala, I forget, Mwanga Chivumbi, aren't they aware of these machinations?
Yes.
Are they aware? Do you think they're simply playing a game?
The same too. Where do they draw their powers and authority? From elsewhere. Am I right?
I said from the electorate.
Well, we vote from the
not electorate.
From the electorate.
You know, the opposition, especially the majority opposition party in the parliament, has its own base as well, where they draw.
Which the voters.
You are making it wrong that way. I have interacted with a few of them who are my friends, like Namuga and others. We talk. But there are cases when they say, until we hear from our boss, we are not going to act in this.
And the boss is the principal of the National Unity Platform?
Certainly.
You meant Pastor Namuga? She's not opposition.
No, I said Namuga. Namuga.
Yeah.
And at personal level, please don't misquote her or misconstrue her.
Absolutely.
At personal level, because we appear on several public media like this one with her, several in this country.
But
so to me,
I would be remiss, and I must be very categorical, if I allowed a member of the National Resistance Movement to vet the opposition on the show. I wouldn't get the most objective.
You would get it from me. From me. I want to tell you this.
Okay.
I am a Ugandan first. How do you tell me? First of all, I'm an independent member of parliament. You tell me as to whether tomorrow I might not be opposition.
NRM leaning independent.
Whether leaning or kneeling, there is no problem. I am a cadre, and that is all. But I want to say, when we are tackling national issues, let us be independent. The way I'm independent, let us be independent in our thinking and analyzing issues. Mr. Mpuga is an epitome of good legislation and a legislator. I want to tell you this. It wouldn't be good for us to keep condemning, and that's why at first I said LOP. I did not want to mention names.
You cannot escape from
you can't, of course,
because that is their position, and they are who they are. So it's already somebody out there might not even understand what LOP is.
But I don't understand this, that we can't mention names and talk about this. They hold public office.
No problem.
Paid for by the taxpayer. So we can't take them away from this.
I'm aware.
Okay, but I want to say this also, because I said I normally focus on the opposition, right? It's my interest because it's the only glimmer, place that you could find some
of hope, maybe.
If you are a good opposition member of parliament, you should be in trouble with the ethics, with the rules and regulations of that space. You should always be in trouble. And you know what is really interesting is that there's constitutionally acceptable trouble.
Constitutionally acceptable trouble.
Such as demonstration, protesting, taking parliament to the streets. All the things are ingrained in our constitutions as perfectly acceptable. Now, those fellows, once they moved into that parliament, they abandoned all those things. Right? So that's my trouble with them. You know, when you say, oh, there are rules and regulations, ethically, power often reproduces itself through the law, through ethics, through regulations. This is why the apartheid state, as you know, John, was a legally implementable mode of government. The more you have more ethics and regulational requirements for any space, at the same time we're claiming freedom of speech and assembly and demonstration, there's a mismatch of ideas there, right? So my estimation of the people that we voted on, the People Power platform, who became a NUP, they should be in trouble in that house. You know, we have kidnaps in this country. They are rarely debated on the floor of parliament.
They are. Several.
Look, when my friend came up the other day,
including a march out, by opposition,
including a march out. You got that wrong. There was a march out, and
there was a march out by
that
opposition.
was also part of a circus.
And
you know why they marched out?
And he said the constitutional way of appraising and all. You are right. There was a march out and led by Honorable Mpuga, the leader of opposition himself. But if you watched Parliament, those of us who remained there, I did remain there, the government, all of us were quiet. There was only one member of Parliament who came up.
All of a sudden, here you are.
The
independence had gone away. The independence that you espoused had gone away. You remained when the others were marching out.
No. Most independents remained. Most independents.
And what was the premise of that action?
There are some, I'm saying, what?
What was the premise of that action?
Because you feel the marching out was not...
we thought possibly also mobilization.
You are
some of us were not told.
Did it require mobilization?
Why not? Sure. I need
That-
prior knowledge. I need
this is
prior knowledge.
This is the theater I'm always telling you about.
You know,
All right.
then the whole country is in a theater. It's theatrical, everything we are doing. And no wonder that whatever we do is theatrical.
But
anyway.
on that, John, I agree with you.
Yes.
You know, but you know, theater and performance, you know, there are levels. There's, you know, the whole world is a stage, and all of us merely players. But there are levels of theater. There's performative, which is only representative. But then there's that theater which is meant to be productive.
Productive theatre.
Productive. Now, the type of theater within Parliament is simply the appearance of it.
No.
All right, Yusuf Serunkuma and Honorable John Musila, the discussion continues after the break. And of course, we shall be delving into exactly how Parliament could be one of the contributing factors to why the economy is ailing, especially when you look at the fact that supplementary budgets are passed at the whim. Stay with us, we'll be right back. All right, interesting here. The discussion behind the scenes is hotter than it is on air, and that is, well, no doubt based on the fact that if we allowed it to be what it ought to be, trust me, I would need a fire extinguisher. Welcome back if you've been with us. For those joining us, the Kickstarter discussion, we are looking at Parliament and legislation into 2023. Can Parliament deliver on the much needed promise? We are also, of course, looking into or giving thought to the things that have not gone as they ought to. When we went into the break, it was hot. Allow me bring on John Musila, the MP for Bobulo East, on this particular question of supplementary budgets and how rampant they are. Many times passed on the whim. There are those who say you are responsible as a house for much of the malaise that we find ourselves in. The economy is ailing. You're not doing a good job on that.
I must accept, because our cardinal role as parliamentarians first is to appropriate, and it is true we do, and we approve these supplementaries. But of course, like in the last session, just on Friday last week, I was here, we were presenting our PAC report, because I'm a member, I had to attend. Now, the speaker, deputy speaker, said, but in 2010 or so, in the other parliament, we passed here money, we voted money, what is it, $200 million or something like that. What happened? You see? So, our role, get the money, fine. The implementation part of it, we are not there. I have been LC5 chairman, and I know once the civil service, the technical officers take over the country or a district, you are in shambles. I am aware of that.
Repeat that.
Once the civil service, who these days call themselves technical, really they are very technical. Once they take over, whether district or a country, we're in trouble.
Why?
I want you to do a scan.
Wait a minute.
Yes,
wait a
please.
minute.
I'm waiting.
That's a very poignant statement you've just made. Are you suggesting that the men and women who are manning the civil service right now, local governments across the country, are not supposed to be the ones doing that job?
No, what I'm saying, how they manipulate the budgets, how they manipulate the money of this country to themselves is what I mean. I've been an LC5 chairman and I know. And if you are not careful, you are an investigative journalist. Try to do a scan in this country. Just around Kampala. See how many buildings are coming up. And a question as to whether they are from businessmen, politicians, or those technical people.
You seem to have this information with you.
Yes.
I may not ask you to name names.
Yes.
But you have an idea where this building, the money that is...
Very well. Deals are cut before even anything comes on. For example, you are doing a road which you know could take about 1 million. This passing year I've been doing roads in my constituency, 56 kilometers. And recently when we had a meeting with the CAO, RDC, DISO and the others and the chairman, I said I was doing my roads with less than 1 million. Simply, grading, simple grading. Do you know how much a sub-counter will put in 1 kilometer? 4 million.
4 million.
4 million. You see, where does that money go? In somebody's pocket. So they know how to plan in such a way that when it comes to implementation, they are the beneficiaries already. Ours, yes, we do bandwagon, we have passed the budget, we have done what, just like we do at the districts. What is done in parliament is also done at district level and other levels of government. But it's eventually the technical officers. And until we go and question, we are in trouble. So it is a true parliament can be...
Please.
Basically, you're saying the technical people are thieves.
Why not? Don't you know that?
Is that...
Don't you know that?
I'm learning.
Yes.
But I have some intuition.
Very good.
From LC5.
Very good.
We've been hearing.
Yes.
This is the thing that Kampala Mayor has been telling the country. That Chisaka's team that she heads as a technical person at City Hall is a bunch of thieves. And you're confirming that. And
why should we speak the same language, same tone, same wavelength with Lukwago? Because I've been LC5 and
please do not make accusations,
public officers.
allegations.
Public officers.
Yeah, when you mention names and then you phrase a bunch of thieves, that statement is entirely honest.
It's quite heavy.
Look, we're going to go back to what I said.
Yeah.
If you hold a public office, your name is going to be on the door.
You've just suggested the head of the...
Your name is on the technical person and this and the MP. I said a bunch. This is what Lukwago has been speaking, saying these figures are inflated. And in plain speech, it's theft, what you call corruption. And language has power. When you express as corruption, you downplay its importance. It's the way it hits when we think about it. When you call it theft, that's clear, right? That's all I'm doing. But I want to say one more time. If you hold a public office paid for by the taxpayer, your name has to be on the door. If we say the technical head of Kampala State Council Authority, your name has to be on the door of that office, and we'll mention it wherever we go. But you know, I don't understand this ethical fascination nowadays with speech and public discourse to say so and so should be not spoken about as long as you are paid for by the taxpayer, you're not a private business person, right? Because I pay for that money. Unless you know what has happened in this country is that we've lost track of how we pay for our public offices, right? There's the direct connection between our taxes and how they misspend our money has been lost. But for us who are still aware, your name has to be on the door of your office. That's how we do it in Makere.
All right, let me ask,
everybody has their names on the door of the office.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, and this is because I believe you have more information than I do on the issue. Do you agree with the Honourable that Parliament and subsequently most of these other houses of legislation, including speakers or at district levels,
district and the sub-county levels,
are deal-making spaces?
I don't know if I should agree with him, but what he said as a practitioner is more authentic. You know, as a scholar, if I were talking to him and he told me something like that, I'll reproduce it in most of my writing. Okay. Right? And I've just, extrapolated and said, even the Kampala city mayor, Lord Mayor Lukwago, has been in the press lately telling us the things are real. So here is another former head of a district telling us that, it's real. When technical persons take over, if I can rephrase, when they take over, they start stealing every small money that the district has. Right? But also, most significantly, we need to say, Uganda is broke, generally. Yeah. We don't have money. As a country, we are broke. The only way you can confirm that, if you're short on cash, maybe 100,000, and you call on 10 of your friends to send you 100,000, maybe one may send you 20. Yeah. The problem is we fail to understand our individual poverty as collective poverty.
It's the microcosm of...
As the entire country, we don't have money. And it has a lot to do with legislation than anything else. Right? The more we legislated, I've been doing the math, how much money leaves this country every single day as money given to telecommunication companies. Because they're all foreign. We killed our Ugandan telecommunication companies, so all this money leaves the country. But also politically, how much money is legislated into businesses so that can trickle down into pockets of individuals. Right? So as a country at this level, there's very little money coming down. So when you rotate in the economy, when you go shopping and stuff like that, there's basically no money.
There's basically no.
Because people don't have money to do business.
Honorable Musila.
Yes, please, sir.
Do you, as a parliament, when I refer that, I say you,
yes,
I'm referring to the
yeah.
collective.
Exactly, the collective.
Do you have the capacity to legislate us out of poverty?
It is a big mountain to go through. It must call upon all Ugandans, not parliament as parliament. We must change our mindset completely as Ugandans. The spendthrift the Ugandan has. You see, when I was in an economics class way back in 1988, my teacher, who I saw only about 5 times before my exams, told us about marginal propensity to spend and to save. I know, my dear, you as a journalist, in your house, you should be having a product from Indians. But how many times do you see them in the public expending that money anyhow? They don't. Marginal propensity to save. I have seen, whether in America or in Europe, every corner there is an Indian, and with a population of 1.3. But I think it is an inbuilt thing in them. Marginal propensity to save is so high. The Ugandan you are talking about, we know how to spend. And until we change that kind of mindset,
are you shifting
the new Ugandan,
the blame?
The Yusufus, the seven Kumars.
Shifting the blame?
No, not at all.
The Ugandans?
I'm not shifting the blame, including us, MPs.
Shouldn't a man imbibe on his product of his labor?
It is okay. How you do it,
you know,
is also a cost
of
posterity.
Okay.
How you do it is a cost on the children, your children or grandchildren or whatever. You must know that.
In the greater scheme of things, as you bring on that particular point, is program-based budgeting better than sector-based budgeting? Or should we strike a balance in order to...
I really have no idea. You need to bring a budget or program expert to discuss that. But there's a point I wanted to make. It's remarkable that a very astute member of parliament will repeat colonial discourse without being aware of it. This stereotyping of Africans as being unable to save.
Unable to save.
Unable to save. You know why major supermarkets are closing this country? Because there are no people buying things in there. Because Ugandans are broke. They don't have what to spend.
No, one could say, for example, within metropolitan Kampala, supermarkets have been diversified into the various spaces. So that those in the city center...
Can I chip in? Can I chip in? No, I own 3 supermarkets in Mbale. Let me just chip in. I own 3 supermarkets in Mbale. Why did the Indians sell them to me? Simply, Ugandans have become so patriotic. We are not buying from Indians. And the Indians...
Let me say again. Stereotyping Africans, stereotyping Ugandans, that they are unable to save.
You're unable to save.
Is wrong diagnosis. The former Minister of Finance, the very astute professor of economics, Professor Ezra Ruma, said very succinctly, unless you disagree with him, that unless Ugandans are able to generate own capital, they will remain paupers. These Ugandans, you see, and he was speaking in the language of banks. He said, unless Ugandans own banks that they're able to generate capital, they'll remain paupers. The Ugandans you see, even if they're driving a BMW, even if they own 3 small supermarkets in their local town, they are broke as whoever you see on the street. The difference that they have a little bit of privilege. They have a bit of leverage. They can operate with minimal inconvenience. But I can guarantee you, this man, with these 3 supermarkets in Mbale, cannot become a chain operating across the country. It can't. It cannot become a chain which can be taken outside of the country, because on the larger scale of things, he is broke. Unless we're able to generate our capital, we will. This is how bankers stereotype us. This is how NGOs stereotype us, that we are unable to save.
Yes,
we have nothing to save.
We are on national television.
Yes.
Are you broke?
According to Yusuf. According to Yusuf, I'm very broke. First of all,
Yeah.
at this level, status, I belong to the intelligentsia.
That's right.
And for him to say that I stereotype, I'm a student of history, fine.
You're repeating
and
colonial
I
things
am,
without
I
being
am a
aware.
Pan-Africanist. That's why I'm a Rastaman. It is good that you should know that I don't side with anything from Babylon. No,
Interesting.
not Babylon.
Gentlemen, we are running out of time, and of course the discussion can continue for as long as we want it, but the
Yes.
constraints of time dictate otherwise. I would love to give you a minute each to do a wrap on what you think 2023 can be, especially when you look at the legislating potential. Take it on.
Maybe he should start.
All right.
Oh,
There you are.
why? You are young.
There you are. Ping pong, ping pong, ping pong.
Elders first.
Elders first.
Who said that? Elders last.
All right.
Okay, no problem. I grew up in Uganda, and I know the respect, especially the Uganda parents impart into the children. But I want to say the legislative agenda of the coming calendar year is going to be a bright one. I want to first of all say, Right Honorable Anita Mong and Right Honorable Tayewa, thank you for what you have done in the past year. The legislations we have done, the bills we have passed, the motions which have come, I want to say thank you. Yes, of course, we don't have, we are not angels. We make mistakes here and there, including us, your lower mortals.
All right.
The last thing I want to say, Ugandans, jitahidi, fungeni misipi kabisa na tufanye kazi. Mambo ya kusambaza pesa hapa na pale, wachana na hiyo.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Is that meant for me?
No, for Ugandans.
Yes, for Ugandans,
Tighten
but
your
including
belts.
you, including you.
Tighten your
because
The tendency
this
to-
year is going to be quite a
It's
bit
going to be quite
hard.
difficult.
But-
difficult.
All right. Allow me.
I gotta say this also, that parliaments are judged. We're gonna say one more time
Yeah.
by landmark
Landmark
significant
legislation.
things. The
Yeah,
Penalty
true.
deal is back to parliament. And I can tell you the legacy of this parliament is there.
And for your information, I'm going for a discussion just right now in Serena Kigo, right now, over the
We'll
same.
judge you by how much, one more time, you hand over this prized asset of this country to a single foreigner.
Yusuf Serunkuma, very quickly, I have here with me a book, Non-Essential Humans, Essays on Governance, Ruin and Survival in COVID-19 Uganda. What's this?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a collection of my writing. I write a regular column in the Observer, and I've written so many things. So this is a collection of my writing and reflection, both practical and theoretical, on COVID-19.
Okay.
The ways in which we survived, the ways in which our governments left us on our own, the ways in which Uganda was trying to sack us, copy-pasting Europe onto this space. So I used the Ugandan example to think about countries such as Malawi, to think about countries such as Tanzania, which was heavily maligned during the COVID-19 pandemic. Think of countries that stood up and said we will implement things the way
The
our
African
context, the way our
Within our
context
context.
warrants.
All right.
So this is available in all bookstores in the country. Mahiri Books is selling this, available at the Uganda Museum. And I think it's, my readers would love to see what I think about how we respond to
All
COVID-19.
right. My producer, I'll ask for a pen so that I can get an autographed copy from Yusuf Serunkuma of this particular one, Non-Essential Humans, Essays on Governance, Ruin and Survival in COVID-19 Uganda. That will do it for the Kick